If there's one thing that me and my clip-on sunglasses know very well, it's that Red Dead Redemption 2 is a very good game. Red Dead Redemption 2 is a game about loyalty, about holding close to your principles in the face of impossible odds. But above all else, it's a game about survival. Just like I am struggling to survive the hike I just did, Red Dead 2 is about struggling to survive against a world that's doing everything it can to crush you and leave you behind. But on the flip side, the gang's unwillingness to change with the times and let go of their old ways is ultimately what fuels the fire that's burning them. That unwavering disinclination to change with the times and to grow, let go of the past, is what corners them into desperation. Oftentimes, very violent desperation. But the gang has each other, right? No matter what, they can always rely on each other. That is, until they can't. But sure, people come and go, sometimes in really tragic ways. Nobody lives forever. At the end of the day, though, we still have us. We still have Arthur Morgan, with his superhuman ability to get himself out of any tight situation, escape death at every turn, dodge every bullet shot at him. But that luck eventually has to run out. I had a sinking feeling that Arthur Morgan would not make it to the end of Red Dead Redemption 2. After all, Red Dead Redemption 2 is a prequel to Red Dead Redemption 1, where Arthur is never seen nor mentioned. And judging by Rockstar's previous willingness to kill their protagonists in cold blood, it really wasn't out of the realm of possibility. I just didn't expect it to happen the way it did. Arthur's TB diagnosis is earth-shattering, game-changing, really. Because no matter how you've been playing up until this point, the game is asking you the very same question. Is this the kind of person you want to be? Is this the kind of life you want to lead? Is this how you want to be remembered? In a single cutscene, Red Dead Redemption 2 goes from a game about survival to a game about death. A lot of modern games have the player deal out a wildly high number of death sentences. In the first 3 Uncharted games alone, it's estimated that Nathan Drake kills nearly 1,800 people. This post on the Call of Duty subreddit details how one Modern Warfare player tried to keep an accurate count of exactly how many people they killed and who exactly those people were. Within these games' lore, it's never really brought up just how unbelievably brutal this is. That one person is responsible for ending so much life. Also how it affects them and the people around them. Sure, a lot of these people are trying to kill you, but video games largely never try to have the player contend with this unbelievable kill count. I can only ever think of one instance. It's actually brought up once at the end of Uncharted 2, but is then quickly ignored.
You think I am a monster, but you're no different from me, Drake. How many men have you killed? How many just today?
But are there games that exist that actually take the time to explore this? The real significance of death? Could there maybe be a specific genre of game that can't seem to stay away from this topic? Perhaps. The only genre of game where its name actually began as a pejorative aimed at both the developers creating these games and the people who enjoy playing them. Typically, these games are very story-driven and offer little to no meaningful interactivity. There can be some light puzzle solving, sure, but in a good handful of these games, your sole purpose in that world is to just exist within it. The main gameplay loop being simple observation and exploration of a new place. The first major release that would help define what a modern walking simulator is was Dear Esther. Developed by the Chinese Room, Dear Esther places you on an uninhabited Hebridean island. But saying that it places you there is kind of a strange assertion to make for a game where it's pretty difficult to say who you are. Your first steps onto the island are heavy. Beginning at a boat launch by a lighthouse, the feeling of longing is something that's impossible to ignore, though I can't say for certain why. The island is a shell of what it once was. The people who settled here must have died ages ago. All the things they left behind, deserted for decades, left to languish in the memory of their former greatness. Their homes, the wreckages of their ships, possessions from a past lifetime. And I, the sole inhabitant, am left to contend with the ghosts and lost memories of these people who, veritably, left their mark on the island. Dear Esther is narrated by a man whose name we never learn, but who is almost undoubtedly the husband of the woman this game takes its name from. Each narration, a few lines of poetry, enigmatic particulars of a traumatic event draped in deep metaphor. The plot of Dear Esther never makes itself easy to parse. There are stories within Dear Esther that are never told, plot points that are never elaborated on. Because of this, you're made to come to your own conclusions. Each subsequent playthrough will offer new lines of poetry, new items to find on the island, and new ghosts to be haunted by. Once you've taken it all in, you'll have filled in enough pieces of the puzzle to be able to create entirely new pieces yourself. Fragments of your own interpretation substituted for the gaps in memory that Dear Esther intentionally leaves unfilled. Whatever you take away from this game, whatever narrative you've woven, is going to be unique to your playthroughs and entirely valid to that universe, because your interpretation is one half of a book written by two authors. Take your time, delve a little deeper, walk a bit slower, and you'll start to see the image more clearly. Here's what I was able to take away. The game's title character, Esther, was killed in a car accident, and our narrator, tormented by guilt, is the sole survivor. This is something he won't let go of for the rest of his life. He recalls stealing a book from the library, which contained maps and detailed descriptions of the uninhabited island we find ourselves on, and he eventually decides to live there. Maybe in an attempt to escape his grief, or maybe to feel closer to Esther. His time on the island is spent reading from the stolen book, and exploring for himself the things he's read about, further familiarizing himself with his new home, and further cementing himself as a permanent fixture of the island. Whatever time is spent not exploring or reading, is spent writing letters to Esther, telling her of his days on the island, his discoveries, his readings. He talks to her every day, then folds the letters into paper boats and sends them off into the ocean. Once the narrator explored the bioluminescent caves, plotting their snaking passageways and writing on the walls, when he falls into a pit, breaking his leg. That injury in time leads to infection, then to fever, and eventually, probably, mild insanity. Trying to escape back to the surface, he stumbles and falls over and over again, chute after chute, deep pit into deeper pit, until this desperation takes him back to the outset of his misery. Here, at the bottom of the world, he comes face to face with his greatest fear, what he believes to be his ultimate failure. The highway where he and Esther's lives were torn apart. The hospital bed where the light left her eyes. It's here, in this impossible subterranean highway, that the narrator truly comes to terms with the full weight of his grief, the deepest pits of his despair. He'll never escape this unending sorrow. He may perhaps resurface from the depths of the cave, struggle and claw his way back out of the bowels of the earth, but he'll never reemerge from the paralyzing depths of his suffering, his unwillingness to let go. Due to either genuine anguish or fevered delirium, Esther at once surrounds him, yet feels farther away than she ever has. He knows that soon he'll join her. And still, he wishes for it to be on his own terms. He intends to fly from the cliffs. In his own words, he wishes to be a paper airplane sailing from the cliff, high above her paper boat.
I've begun my voyage in a paper boat without a bottom. I will fly to the moon in it. I've been folded along a crease in time, a weakness in the sheet of life. Now you've settled on the opposite side of the paper to me. I can see your traces in the ink that soaks through the fiber, the pulped vegetation. When we become waterlogged and the cage disintegrates, we will intermingle. When this paper aeroplane leaves the cliff edge and carves parallel vapor trails in the dark, we will come together.
Dear Esther lends a weight to death that most other games don't seem to care to. Die as many times as you need to overcome a difficult challenge. Die in goofy ways to keep things lighthearted. Keep a running total of just how many deaths you've experienced as something to laugh at once you finally reach the end of a tough level. Only when the action is halted, only when the music slows, and only when death decides to visit someone you're close to is when it all finally matters. But it's usually only momentary. Just a small break to feel something real quick before you're back to murdering hundreds. And I'm not saying this is a bad thing. These games know what they are, and they pull it off sensationally. But it's certainly a breath of fresh air to be reminded every now and again. In a heavy contrast to other games' depictions of death, either sidestepping its weight or merely dipping their toes in, Dear Esther puts monumental significance back into death, and it's truly beautiful. But this is only the beginning. I mentioned that Dear Esther was the first game to really define the modern walking simulator. After this, we received landmark titles such as The Beginner's Guide, Gone Home, The Vanishing of Ethan Carter, Firewatch, Naissance, and The Stanley Parable. But still, Dear Esther sticks out for its poignant explorations of grief and death. I'm fascinated by it, even if it covers ideas I'd rather ignore for the sake of my mental well-being. Or at least that's how I used to feel. All of these games are excellent and do an incredible job of getting their messages across through the very malleable medium of video games. But nowhere is death explored more deeply than in what I believe to be the pinnacle of this entire genre. What Remains of Edith Finch. What Remains of Edith Finch takes the best of Dear Esther's rich atmosphere and haunting tale of grief and death, and uses it as a foundation to tell a very direct and more personal story. But really, it's how that story is told that makes this so special. What Remains of Edith Finch puts you in the shoes of its title character, who is returning home after the death of her mother. She finds herself walking up the steps to the old Finch family house, which has sat abandoned for 6 years. To say that the Finch house is unconventional would be an insane understatement. It's really more akin to something out of a Dr. Seuss book. The house is a towering, multi-generational maze of intricate interconnected crawl spaces, bedrooms, and hidden passageways. And it's all sat empty for so long, left as a monument to those who called it home. And Edith, now 17, has come back home to try and further connect with her ancestry and document its remarkable mysteries as the last surviving Finch. The Finch house proudly wears its history on its sleeve. Every hallway, bathroom, crawl space, and bedroom holds the memories and final days of the people who called this house a home. Their books, their photographs, their Chinese takeout. The ghosts of the past linger in every hall, in their most cherished possessions, in their unmade beds, or in the stuffed animals left behind, as if they'll be back in just a few minutes. Decades later, each bedroom now serves as a shrine to the deceased family member who, long ago, rested their head in this very room. After a while, though, their doors were locked tight. I guess the constant reminders of your own mortality was just a bit much. But what was once buried by doors sealed shut can be reborn through secret passages and crawl spaces. Entering their bedrooms and seeing the last hours of each deceased relative paints an even clearer picture of who these people were. Everything is as they left it just before they died. Their final moments, completely untouched. Either out of respect or grief, probably both. We see their hopes and their dreams, their fears. These rooms they slept in night after night, the one place they probably felt the most safe, the one place they could truly be themselves, and it all perfectly showcases the things they cared about most. You really do feel close to these people. These time capsules almost make it feel as if they're still here, like they could walk back in the room at any moment. It's beautiful. The compassion that this game shows for the dead is so refreshing. These people aren't just plot devices shoehorned in to make you feel a certain way. They aren't statistics or unknown faces and names. They're all people. They all mattered. The more you explore the house, the more you learn about Edith's relatives and how they met their ends. You start to get a better idea of this family's bizarre, casual relationship with death. Some believe it's a curse on their family, a curse of untimely ends, for all the Finches to die in terrible or ironic ways. And even still, they don't treat death as some imposing antagonistic demon as much of us do. They treat it as a guest in their home. Sure, the death of a loved one is always tragic, but recognizing that the line barring life from death can be very thin is the first step to true acceptance of what's always waiting at the end of the road. There isn't a villain in what remains of Edith Finch, no opposing force to battle against. It's just the simple fact that death is inevitable. Seeing the stories of this family through Edith's eyes, having its loved ones taken away almost systematically, even occasionally as children, gives us another interesting perspective that a lot of us don't really think about that often. The continuance of life after death. We are all someday going to die, but we spend every day of our lives planting seeds of ourselves everywhere we go. The people we connect with, the marks we leave on the world, our children who carry on our legacy. All of them, in one way or another, are the trees we plant whose shade we'll never get to rest in. Edith has come back home as the last surviving Finch, but she isn't here solely to unearth her past and pay respects to her family. She's here to plant seeds of her own. It's stated pretty clearly from the beginning. Edith is pregnant. She is very soon going to bring another Finch into the world. But you can sense the uncertainty in her voice. Will she be just another story of an unfortunate end? Another shrine? Another locked bedroom door? No. She's Edith, a human being with complex thoughts and emotions, full of love and fears and hopes and doubts, just like Sam and Calvin, Sven and Edie, Molly, Barbara, Gregory, Gus, Dawn, and Milton. She's gathering all the lost memories, all the fantastical and heartbreaking stories of Finch's past, to let them live on through her child as people who mattered, and, in the end, gave life to something new. These are the memories she wants to keep alive, to definitively show her child their place in the world, and to remind them to treasure their time in it, to appreciate all the things and the people who brought them here, and to also, in Edith's own words,
I want you to
be amazed
that any of us ever had a chance to be here at all. Good luck.
I want to return to Red Dead Redemption 2 for a moment. Have you ever played a game that just feels slow? Just kind of a drag? You've heard from all your friends that things get a lot more interesting once you get a few more hours in. So you really try and push through that monotony at the beginning, rush towards the excitement. Then you get there and, yeah, things are a lot more interesting. That was Red Dead Redemption 2 for me. Chapter 1 was a slog. Chapter 2 really wasn't a huge step up for me in terms of the story, but Chapter 3, yeah, it gets a little crazy. But Red Dead Redemption 2 only has 6 chapters and an epilogue. Don't get me wrong, the game is quite long regardless of how many chapters it has. It just feels weird having hurried through a third of the game because it felt too slow. But this actually led me to something pretty unexpected. Late in the game, as the situation becomes more desperate, as more of the gang's members are killed and the remainder's bonds are weakened and eventually torn, you slowly start to see it. That dark cloud of dread that's begun to hang over the Vanderlyn gang. If you're really paying attention, this has all been compounding even before Arthur has been given a death sentence. Pressing on into uncertainty, trying against all odds to do the right things for the right people that I care about, a thought pops into my head that I thought never would. I actually began to miss the slower opening chapters of the game. I missed when my worries seemed few and the pressures of the world weren't boxing me in as much as they are now. I missed when the gang all stood by each other through thick and thin. I missed when the world seemed like a brighter and more lively place with infinite opportunity. I'm sure there's an Office quote that describes this perfectly.
I wish there was a way to know you're in the good old days before you've actually left them.
But then, something else unexpected happens, right as the game ends. Arthur's work is done. Dutch and Micah have disappeared, and John, Abigail, and Jack have escaped to safety. We close in on Arthur taking his last breaths, finally resting after spending his final hours trying to save the ones he cares for, and fade to black. But then we come right back. Some years later, John, Abigail, and Jack looking for work in a new town, laying low, trying to make an honest living. Gone are the high stakes and explosive shootouts of the past. No more trying to stay one step ahead of the Pinkertons, or waging war against the accursed O'Driscoll gang. And no more Dutch leading everyone to ruin. Those days are far behind us. And because of the gifts given by those who died, John has a clean slate, a chance to really live and be happy. So, what does that entail? Well, it's making deliveries for the Strawberry General Store. It's working as a ranch hand, going to the bank to apply for a loan, building a house, or breaking in horses. It sort of seems like the game actually read my mind. It heard my longing for those easier days, free from excessive violence, the more quiet and quote-unquote slow chapters of the beginning. But even still, the feeling is creeping back into my mind. It is apparent that John really does want to change. He wants to leave the past behind him for the sake of his family, truly adjust to this more peaceful lifestyle, and not squander all that Arthur has left for him. He's been given a golden ticket, one that he can use in any way he pleases. But sometimes, old habits really do die hard. About 4 years ago, I lost 2 grandparents within a month of each other. And don't get me wrong, this was incredibly sad. But it was the first time that I had ever really lost a family member that was this close to me. I had lost family members before, but I didn't know them that well. That or I was very young and couldn't really fully understand it. But these hit really hard. And yes, I was extremely sad. But the prevailing feeling more than anything was awkwardness, I guess you could say. I remember being initially perplexed. I had just talked to them a few days ago. What do you mean they're just gone? It's that awkward feeling of not really knowing what to do with your hands, not knowing where to stand in your elementary school play. You just want to do the right thing, feel what you need to feel, and then you want it to be over. I almost felt bad that one of the bigger emotions I was feeling alongside sadness was actually not being totally sure how to feel at all. We got things in order for one grandparent pretty quickly. But the other grandparent, because her side of the family is so big, we really couldn't get everyone together for a funeral until 6 months ago. So much time had passed. I had been through so much, highs and lows scattered throughout. I had lived so much life, long after hers had ended. Was she really absent that entire time? How often did I think about that day? She was such a huge part of my family. Her death was earth-shattering, a 90-year chapter coming to a close. But somehow I had to turn the page and just keep going. But those pages won't always be mine to write in. My book, too, also has a finite number of pages. That was the other thing on my mind. I couldn't help it. Seeing it all from the outside looking in, just the thought that someday I'll have to play that role as well. I'll have to take that final step. 1 minute I'll be there, and the next, my final chapter will come to a close. And the funeral will be mine. This is Proteus. Proteus is, as its Steam page states, a game about exploration and immersion in a dreamlike island world where the soundtrack to your play is created by your surroundings. Played in first person, the primary means of interaction is simply your presence in the world and how you observe it. One of the defining characteristics of this dreamlike island world is that it is randomly generated every time you play. When you finish playing, that island will disappear forever, and upon replaying, you'll be given a completely new island, a new perspective, a different experience than the last. Each playthrough, an island that is uniquely just for you. I start in the ocean, the calm water shimmering into the distance. But across that large distance, I can see something peeking out through the fog. As I get closer, I can see exactly what they are. They're trees, flowers, a sandy beach. Chickens peck at the ground. I watch squirrels scurry across the grass. Cherry blossom leaves fall from the branches into soft piles on the ground. And rain clouds roll through the canopy overhead. This is a world that is, despite its excessive simplicity, very much alive and thriving. And it has so much to say. Everything I do and everywhere I go is accompanied by a change in music, and it's delightful. I take in my surroundings, and I try to ground myself in this new world, keep my mind open to everything it wants to show me. Though the first thing I really want to do is climb this mountain to get a real lay of the land, center myself, and get a better sense of direction. The view is about what I expected. Pixelated forests as far as the eye can see, or as far as the distant fog would allow. Walking back down from the mountaintop, I found these peculiar stone slabs that were placed near perfectly in a row. Unsure of what they meant or what they even were, I followed them in one direction to see if it led me anywhere. And it did. This ruined tower, watching over the forest. Despite its simplicity, I can easily tell it's probably been here for a very long time. I can't seem to find any way inside, but I notice the music swelling as I wander around it. Surely this must be an important place. But before I can investigate further, I take a look back down towards the stone slabs, and I notice that the single row I initially found wasn't alone. There's dozens of these things, all sitting in the small field between the mountain and the woods. Like a knee-jerk reaction, the idea plants itself in my brain. They're gravestones. There's no way they could be anything else. They must be gravestones. Proteus never outright tells you this, but I can't get the thought out of my head that this is what they have to be. It's what they are. But who would be buried here? How long have they been dead? My mind wanders. Following the trail as the sun goes down, I come upon one more gravestone, all alone here at the top of the mountain. It must be someone who held great importance to those who lived here. Maybe some brave adventurer who first discovered the island and conquered the mountain. Though it's on this mountaintop that I notice something in the distance that catches my eye. Mysterious swirling lights, one of the only things that the distant fog isn't obscuring. I follow them, and when I arrive, I find something completely unexpected. My island looks a little different now. Not drastically, but it's changing. Time is moving forward. The grass is a little drier, the sun is a little hotter, and the warm weather is allowing some new creatures to show themselves. Looking out over the land, I can feel my connection to those forests and shrublands growing stronger. This is my island, and for as simple and as pixelated as it is, I'm really learning to love it. With the wind in my ear and the new season offering greater visibility, I noticed something in the distance that I never saw on my first time around the island. A small cottage, sitting quietly in a meadow. As I wander over to it, my mind races about what I might find. I wonder who lives there and what they know. I might finally get to talk to someone and learn a little bit more about the island. But alas, this cottage is just as quiet, and its only door is locked. But the owner must be around somewhere. An island this beautiful, so full of life. That cozy little cottage, there must be someone who still lives here, right? I hope I get to meet them. Day once again turns into night, and I stop for a while to watch the moon rise over the ocean. A much-needed moment of calm and reflection on all I've seen. I take a quiet walk along the water, as the night forces the island to grow uncharacteristically still. This is the first time I think I've ever felt such a lack of any movement. It's tranquil, but in a way the island has never presented itself to me before. And then, almost unsurprisingly, the lights appear again. The game started in spring, then moved on to summer. The next season would have to be fall, of course. I step inside to watch the world go by once again. But then, This is certainly fall. The bright orange and red leaves falling to the ground. But strangely, I feel this uneasy emptiness. I sense this atmosphere of melancholy blanketing the island. Where did this come from? I explore a bit more, and I find this massive tree, the largest I've seen yet. It's magnificent. It has to be hundreds of years old. It's certainly seen more seasons than I can count. And through all of that time, it's still here. But even it can't break through this loneliness. It just seems so tired. You feel it all around, don't you? The island is settling in. All that life and music that echoed across every acre, is starting to get exhausted, worn out. Maybe it's already asleep. Such a bright burst of color and life had to fizzle out eventually. I didn't expect it to feel like this. My travels bring me back to the cottage. Somehow it seems more still now than when I first found it. Whereas before I wondered who lived here and hoped I'd be able to find them, now I can say for certain that nobody's home. I feel these powerful emotions welling up inside. It's hard to put my finger on, but it's something that's not quite sadness, but it isn't joy either. Rain clouds roll by overhead, seemingly in recognition of my mournfulness and reflecting it back at me. But inevitably, the rains subside, the clouds will part, and that clarity gives way to a brilliant show of light in the night sky. One final burst of life, a penultimate show of the world's magnificence, one last moment of reflection before the final chapter of our journey. The long sleep. The world seems frozen in time, trapped and withering away under a ceiling of thick clouds. Life has abandoned my beautiful island and left it a shell of what it once was. I trudge through the snow until I find the cottage again, sitting silently, bathing in what little of the morning light is able to pierce through the clouds. I don't stick around very long this time. I know logically that this is one season in a cyclical rotation of seasons. Spring must return again. But I can't shake the feeling that this is permanent. That old island, once so animated, so full of life and color, has faded away. Sort of feels like I'm fading too. But still, I explore as I always have. I walk through the dead forests and along the icy coastline until I get an idea. I notice that the clouds aren't sitting above the mountaintops. No, they're obscuring them from the surface's view. Maybe if I climb to the top, I could get a glimpse of the sky and not feel so suffocated. And wouldn't you know it, a breath of fresh air, a reassurance that maybe I didn't lose everything. I see that same old tower resting just barely above the clouds. At least it's still the same. It was always dead. That tower is the last remnant I have of the old island. Ironically, it's the most alive piece of the island still remaining. From there, I make my way back down to the graveyard. Full circle. I walk among the dead for a short time until I realize I'm no longer walking at all. I'm slowly but steadily rising, my ascent matching the sun's descent. I look downward as the island slowly slips out of my grasp, as it all disappears into the fog beneath me. In a way, it's less like I'm ascending, it's more as if my island is being lowered into its grave. There it is again, that bitter, ineffable feeling. I was right. This is the end. But then the clouds break, and I begin to see it. The aurora dwarfs the island. And there's that tower again. What once felt as some forgotten dusty remains devoid of life now sits as a monument to the island's memory, standing proudly against this final explosion of beauty. I feel like time has completely stopped, like this moment will last forever. Until I watch as the mountains are consumed by fog. All that's left is me and infinity. And once again, the long sleep. I think what all this has led me to is, yes, death is tragic. It's terrifying. And a lot of the time, it's unfair. But in the end, death is what makes life beautiful. Knowing that at some point, it must end. Recognizing the impermanence of all of this should make us want to appreciate what we have even more, right? This experience that we're so lucky enough to have is the destination, and it should be treasured. Life's not always fair to every one of us. I recognize that. But if you're able, please, just try. You have to try. The larger story of our families, our friends, of humanity, knowing that we're a small but significant part of something bigger, something that will continue to influence long after we're gone, it's absolutely incredible. And we should all feel so lucky. There is an end coming, but that's far away for the moment. Our time that we have right now, it's an incredible opportunity, and not one that we need to constantly stress over. This is an opportunity to breathe air, to laugh and create, to experience all the strangeness and beauty that the earth has to offer, and to love as hard as we can. All of this is ours because of the people who came before us, the ones who have passed on. So enjoy the shade of their trees while you plant seeds of your own. Live to the fullest. Make this matter, so that when the end does come, you can welcome it like a guest in your home. Enjoy this gift while you have it. You've got all the time in the world.
Your hands upon a dead man's gun, and you're looking down the sights. Your heart is worn, and the seams are torn, and they've given you a reason to fight.
I am fairly positive that what I am walking on is actually a lake frozen over with a couple feet of snow covering it. So I know this video is about death. I would just really rather it not be about my death. Let's get the f*** out of here.